As a Sunday fan, I often find myself being questioned about why I like a character who did what he did. As a philosopher, this led me to consider whether there is any ethical framework which would justify what he did in Penacony, starting off with a system which I am personally partial towards, virtue ethics. Aristotle's entire philosophy can be thematized by his belief that everything has a telos, or an end goal. Moreover, every craft and every line of inquiry, and likewise every action and decision, seem to seek some good. This certainly seems consistent with what we see from Sunday. His dream was directed at an apparent good, but we must then ask if the dream was a real good or supportive of people reaching the highest good. Some goods are greater, and some merely a means to other goods. The greatest of all goods for people is happiness, as it is an end. What we will question is whether Sunday's conception of the good is in line with Aristotle's. For Sunday, the good would be a life free from suffering. But for Aristotle, to truly be happy, one must act virtuously. A virtuous person is someone who acts in the way that is in accordance with reason, as reason is the function of people. For Aristotle, reason will tell us that we must not act in excess or deficiency, and that contemplation is the highest virtue. In Sunday's dream, people are free to indulge in material pleasures and are not encouraged to develop the rational parts of their soul. While Sunday may agree with the end of happiness as suitable for humans, he does not seem to share the idea that reason is the function of people, nor that there is only one way to achieve this happiness. This may be a strength of his ethical position, but in this way he diverges from a crucial part of Aristotle's ethics. However, virtue ethics firstly asks what makes a person virtuous, rather than whether an action is right or wrong. We should ask whether or not Sunday is virtuous in character, and whether or not he acts in excess or deficiency of virtues. Sunday does exhibit coldness and deceptiveness, but he also seems to exhibit a caring side as well. Here's where things get tricky. For Aristotle, every action contributes to a virtuous or vicious character, yet this character is also meant to reveal the ethical value of actions. For this reason, virtue ethics often relies on other ethical systems as a supplement, which leaves me unable to say whether or not his actions were justified under a virtue ethics account. Still, I would say that stopping others from reaching the truth would be far from commendable from an Aristotelian point of view. Kant's Deontology arises out of a desire to capture an ethical system which accounts for the belief that what is good is always good. It is universal and eternal. What decides whether an action is right or wrong is whether an agent's will was good or not, because the good will is the only thing which cannot be used badly. On the outset, this theory may appear as if it could justify Sunday's actions. After all, his well-meaning intentions are surely a positive aspect of his character. For Kant, there is a way to test this, that is, through reason and the categorical imperative. There are two formulations of this imperative, which are designed to test whether or not one has a good will. The first formulation of the categorical imperative dictates that one may only act in a way such that that which they are willing can be universalized without contradiction. That is, it must be logically possible that everyone act in the way that you wish to. If we formatted Sunday's will through the first formulation of the categorical imperative, we would ask something like this. Can it be willed that every agent condemn themselves to the waking world in order so that others may live in a dream? Here we see a logical contradiction, because it is not possible that every agent be awake yet dreaming at the same time, which would be the result of universalizing this will. This immediately shows us that Sunday's actions were not justified, but we haven't even looked at the second formulation yet. Kant's philosophy emphasizes the autonomous individual and the value of each person being a self-legislator. The second formulation asks that all people be treated as an ends and never merely as a means to an end. Again, it seems that Sunday's removal of agency from autonomous beings, even for the sake of helping them reach happiness, breaks the rule of the second formulation. To put it bluntly, Sunday's imposition of the sweet dream is a Kantian nightmare. There are two ways of articulating utilitarianism, that is, as rule utilitarianism and act utilitarianism. Rule utilitarianism aims at establishing a set of rules which will lead to the greatest good, then through using these rules, acts can be evaluated. Act utilitarianism evaluates acts directly by asking about the consequences of those actions. For this interpretation, I will stick with act utilitarianism, as I think it will make for a more interesting discussion. Mill's utilitarianism rests on one principle, the greatest happiness principle. Actions are right insofar as they produce happiness, and good insofar as they promote pleasure and prevent pain. Happiness is the ultimate good because it is the only thing desired for its own sake. The means to these ends are not the focus of a consequentialist framework. Now, from the outset, this framework may look more promising if one hopes to justify Sunday's actions. Sunday's dream presumably produced more pleasure than pain. But here's where things get tricky. To define happiness, Mill appeals to a difference between higher and lower pleasures. To do this, he distinguishes between higher and lower faculties. Shockingly enough, faculties which appeal to our rationality are said to be of higher pleasure, which he claims is clear to anyone who has had the opportunity to exercise them. I would consider one of the strengths of Sunday's morality to be his recognition that there are different goods for different people, and different ways to achieve these goods. Ultimately, in this utilitarian framework, this actually works against him. In the Sweet Dream, while people are imprisoned in it, they are free to achieve their own good by any means. It does not appear as if Sunday imposed significant enough guidance to ensure that people are maximizing their own pleasure. That isn't to say conclusively that the Sweet Dream didn't maximize pleasure over pain, but this is a critique that could be leveled against him. This approach is actually meant to serve as a guide to measure the quality of people's lives, but it also provides a list of goods which should be available to people in order for them to flourish in life. What Nussbaum wants for people to have are combined capabilities. She defines this as trained, developed abilities of a person, along with the social conditions which allow for choice. The goal is for all beings to rise above a threshold level of these capabilities. This does not mean that everyone must act on these capabilities. One of the elements which is often considered an advantage of Nussbaum's view is that she recognizes a plurality of goods which are unique to individuals, and that every person has their own conception of the good life. I think there are two ways in which we can view Sunday's actions in regards to this understanding of the good. On the one hand, we could say that Sunday has a monist view of the good, meaning that he believes everyone's goods are fundamentally the same. This can be seen through his conviction that the good life for people is one free from evils, thus why he subjects everyone to his own will. Conversely, however, within the bounds of the dream, he does not impose a certain lifestyle or value system which people must follow. They are free, in a sense, to pursue what they believe is the good life for them, even if only in appearance. Of course, we can also consider that he still failed to recognize that some do value reality, but it is interesting that his dream did allow for hardship for those who deemed it valuable. It seems to me that his intentions and hopes for humanity do align with Nussbaum's to some extent. However, in this approach, it is not functioning and acting on one's capabilities, which is good, but it is having the choice to do so. And Nussbaum takes a firm stance against paternalism, or the interference with the lives of others who are sufficiently autonomous. For this reason, Sunday's actions cannot be justified under this approach. He most definitely violated the autonomy of those who are capable of making decisions about whether or not they'd like to live in a dream. For the final approach, I'll turn to Beauvoir's ethics of ambiguity, an example of a feminist and existentialist ethics. Something important to know about existentialism, which will inform this framework, is that freedom is deemed to be of the utmost importance. The person's existence precedes their essence, that is, what is the necessary property of a person is not defined by the fact that they are human. Additionally, for Beauvoir, the human condition is ambiguous. Humans are in a place between an established and fixed past and a free and open future. Humans are both objects to others and subjects of themselves. The human condition is one of being bound by fact, but also one of being radically free. Like other systems of ethics, Beauvoir's also comes from an ontological claim. But instead of being ordained by God or given through reason, what is ethical is justified by whether or not it supports human freedom. You can probably already see the implications of this. Freedom, being the only good which is self-justifying, makes respect for others' autonomy crucial to an existentialist ethics. Because freedom is valuable in and of itself, this is enough to condemn Sunday's actions. Additionally, Beauvoir explains the dangers of holding on to absolute beliefs. People must recognize ambiguity in their lives. One must find a balance between absolutes and hollow commitments. She claims that when one is committed too deeply to their beliefs, without allowing for any questioning of these beliefs, a person will turn into a fanatic. This kind of person, who is obsessed with control, fits into the archetype of a person whom she calls the serious man. Sunday's disposition and wholehearted commitment to the order during the main Penacony arc, I think, maps on well to this specific archetype. Sunday, being of this kind of character, is what makes him prone to take away the freedom of others. Ultimately, Beauvoir's existentialist framework cannot justify his actions. Obviously, I'm far from covering every ethical system. This video was admittedly focused on Western philosophy. I didn't make this video in order to convince you that what he did was good or bad. I made it to explain in what ways we can understand the advantages and disadvantages of Sunday's ethical convictions. Anyways, thanks for watching. Feel free to continue the discussion in the comments or to join me on Twitch where we can talk about this more. Until next time.